What I think a lot of my viewers forget, and what maybe even I myself forget sometimes, is that I wasn't always a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player. While it is true that I have been playing Yu-Gi-Oh since around 2003 when the game just about first came to the North America region, I haven't always been competitive. Obviously, I was like in 3rd grade when it came out, so I wasn't really taking the game too seriously. I was just one of the many kids that watched the anime and wanted to have the cards for himself. Now this matters because it means that I haven't always been so worried about card advantage and tempo and do nothing cards and all this sort of stuff that I mention in all of my videos. And in today's video I want to go through some of my favorite casual Yu-Gi-Oh cards. These were cards that I used all the time, and you'll kind of notice here I've put them in chronological order, and you'll also notice that they get more competitive as they go along. That just is because even by the end of my sort of casual era of Yu-Gi-Oh, which would have been about 2013-ish, even at that point I still was more competitive than I was back in 3rd grade. Anyway, let's jump right in, and the first card is Darkblade. Now there are a plethora of different normal monsters that I could have put on this list, but I think if I really think back to the normal monster that I used the most and that I liked the most, it's Darkblade. There were other cards I liked like Aquamador and Launcher Spider, but Darkblade went into pretty much every single deck that I played, and for a good reason. 1800 attack was a lot back in sort of elementary school Yu-Gi-Oh, and this guy was super strong because of that. And also it mattered a lot that when I started to get a little better at Yu-Gi-Oh, and I don't even know how I managed to get them, but I had a BLS and a Chaos Emperor Dragon at some point in elementary school, which is pretty crazy to think about because those cards were still pretty expensive back then. Even with that in mind though, when I got those cards and I took many of the really garbage cards out of my deck, I actually still kept Darkblade in because it is a dark monster and you can banish it to summon either of those monsters. Now eventually I did take this card out of my deck, but for most of elementary school and middle school, Darkblade was a staple in every single strategy that I ever would play, and it definitely hurt taking it out of my deck for the final time. Now I do want to mention that I did really enjoy that this card got a retrain. Obviously it had some other forms when it came out, it even had an equip spell, but eventually got a retrain in I think Order of Chaos, and that card's pretty cool. It's actually like a pretty unique way to beat light decks if you happen to be in a matchup where that matters, but I tried to make that card work. It didn't work so well, but it is cool that they did retrain my favorite card several years after I'd stopped playing it, and if that card ever does become an actual decent side deck choice, you bet that I will be playing it in whatever deck I can. While I pretty much did stop watching the Yu-Gi-Oh anime after the original series back when I was a kid, I did catch a couple episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh GX, and one of my favorite cards from that series, at least the episodes that I watched when I was a kid, were the Aster Phoenix episodes. I really did like the Destiny heroes. I thought they were cool and edgy and all the things that a 12-year-old really likes. And yeah, one of my favorite cards from that series was Destiny hero Doomlord, and I played this card in a lot of decks. It certainly helped that this card was a common card, unlike a lot of the better Destiny heroes like Malicious, which were really hard to come by, but I actually liked Doomlord a lot, and you can sort of see where this fits in with the Darkblade thing. Yes, this card is dark, so I can banish it for BLS. I pretty much played BLS and Chaos Emperor Dragon in every single deck until I realized that traditional format wasn't the actual format. But yeah, Doomlord is a pretty cool piece of spot removal, and I think what's interesting is that when I look at this card now, and I sort of remembered the effect looking back, I knew it like banished something. This is basically just a worse version of Eater of Millions, which kind of does lead into the fact that I really do enjoy playing Eater of Millions. I like just spot banishing cards at will, and I think that's a pretty cool idea. There aren't a ton of monster cards that do that, and a lot of times they're attached to these dark monsters of small attack points, so I kind of see the similarities between Eater of Millions and Doomlord sort of in hindsight now. But Doomlord's a really cool card, and I played a lot of the Destiny hero cards and all sorts of them that probably weren't very good. I remember liking Blade Master as well, and that card's obviously terrible, but Doomlord was a little bit more competitive than Darkblade. And also I think I do want to mention one of the things that I noticed just growing up when this was sort of happening is that the Destiny hero cards in general, a lot of them had really small attack points like Doomlord, and I think this is when I first realized that attack points aren't everything. Now maybe it's not the best example because Doomlord isn't the best card, but this is about the time that I realized, hey, this one Doomlord with 600 attack can just banish anything. It doesn't matter how much attack points other monster has, and that's kind of when when I started looking at cards' effects more than their actual attack points, so it's a pretty big stepping stone for me becoming eventually a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player. I think I've mentioned this in past videos, but I was actually really excited when Synchro Monsters first came out, and I bought a ton of Duelist Genesis packs. Whatever I had as far as money pretty much went into those packs back then, and one of the cards that I pulled a lot of copies of because it's a common and a card that I played in many decks was Domino Effect. Now this card is hilariously bad. I probably should have played anything else like Lightning Vortex or Dark Hole or Sakuratsu Armor, although I'm pretty sure I did have multiple copies of Dark Hole and Sakuratsu Armor. But anyway, I shouldn't have played Domino Effect. It's not that good of card, but what it does is when a monster your opponent controls is destroyed by battle sent to the graveyard, you can then get rid of one of your monsters to get rid of another one of their monsters. And I thought that was cool. I thought there was a lot of flavor, a lot of lore. I thought the artwork really portrayed what the effect was doing really well. And I thought this card was awesome. Sort of in the same way that Destiny Hero Doomlord can get rid of bigger monsters. A lot of times I would do these quote-unquote cool combos with Domino Effect where I would run over a smaller monster to take out my opponent's big boss monster, and a lot of the times that actually did win me those casual matchups, and I like this card a lot. Now, when I finally started to transition to competitive, which was around this time, as far as that weird, awkward couple year period where I'm like not really playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh, but I'm getting older, so then when I go back to my old decks like once every summer, because pretty much I didn't play during my high school years as far as the school year went. I just came back and during the summer played at locals and stuff, and when I went back to my year-old decks, I was looking at cards like Domino Effect, and as a growing adult person, I guess, I looked at them and said, okay, maybe this card isn't that good. And that's not to say that Domino Effect is a terrible card, but it certainly isn't something that you'd want out of casual games. It doesn't work in any sort of competitive sense. It only works at those lunch table duels. While I didn't like this next card when it first came out, I stumbled upon it a little bit later in about 2012, and that is Heiress, and I loved this card's artwork. Like, this card is so cool. I think if you have known me as far as the channel goes, you might know that I really do like light blue as a color. That's one of the reasons that Sfeel is so awesome to me, and you can kind of see that Heiress has about the same color of body as far as Sfeel does, so I don't know if that plays into it, but I love sea creatures. They're really cool. I've played Mermails a lot, and this card is so awesome, but it's also the first card on this list that you can actually see a real strategy formed around, because this card honestly isn't that bad, and obviously you can send Umi to the graveyard to pop 2 cards, but the cool thing about this card, well, there's 2 cool things. First off, there's a trap version that not only acts as Umi, but also you can protect the Heiress, and that's kind of cool, but also this thing does target, but it doesn't destroy the cards, and I can remember killing a whole bunch of Stardust Dragons with Heiress way back in the day when Stardust Dragon was really popular. This card is not that bad. Now that I'm looking at it, I wasn't thinking about this earlier, this card actually would be really interesting to add to Duel Links. I don't think it's in Duel Links, but this card would be kind of cool. I would definitely play this in Mermails if it's in Duel Links. I'll have to go look that up, but I don't think it's in Duel Links because this card would probably actually be played, because in Duel Links there's like that field spell ability that starts Umi on the board. That's really important, but this card is really cool, and actually I went back and I looked it up, and I did post a video about this card in 2014, and I'll post a list on there. It's really blurry because the uploading back then wasn't so hot, but it was kind of like a rank 4 water deck using Heiress, using actual legendary ocean that you could search out with Warrior of Atlantis, all sorts of fun stuff. I thought that deck was really cool. Maybe I'll play it on stream sometime, but I really like Heiress, and I think if you can already sort of see, this is like that transitionary period where I'm looking at better cards with real strategies. Even if they're not super competitive, this is definitely on another level than the 3 previous cards we've talked about. I would eventually really start trying to be competitive in Yu-Gi-Oh! In the events after the WCQ in 2013. However, right before that, I distinctly remember that my last sort of casual strategy was a Machina-based deck, and one of the cards I was most excited for, released in April of that year, was Gearspring Spirit, and I was so excited for this card. You guys have no idea. I thought this was going going to revolutionize the Machina deck. And I think I even was playing like Geargia in there. There were so many normal summons. I probably was playing gadgets too. But this card I thought was like instant spot removal for anything, and also you could discard it from your hand to special summon a Machina Fortress from your graveyard. I thought this card was insane. Now, if you guys know about April 2013, this was also the set that Lavalval Chain got released in, and Daigusto Emerald, and the Evil Swarms. But more importantly, Dragon Rulers and Spellbooks at full power were just around the corner, and that meant that my little Machina deck did not do super hot against those sort of actual meta decks, and I eventually had to drop it for a more stun-based strategy at the WCQ, and that was actually the first WCQ that I ever played in, which was really exciting for me. And I think that at that WCQ, when I mean, this is something that happens if you've never been to the WCQ. A lot of people that get their first invite, especially if it wasn't like a top 8 and it was just an invited spot, like a 32nd or a 31st something, they go to that WCQ and they don't realize how competitive it is and how much harder it is than the normal regionals, especially if they've never been to a YCS like I hadn't been. And what happened is I went like 1-4 and then dropped, and it was just insane, and that really got me hooked. I think a lot of people that have that happen to them, they either get hooked on the game and want to be really competitive because they realize there's so much more to it than they realize, or it's really discouraging and they quit forever. In my case, it got me hooked on this game competitively, and ever since then I've been trying to become better and better every single year, which I think I've done a pretty decent job of. Anyway though, that's gonna wrap up today's video talking about my favorite casual Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this change of pace. I know that it seems like I only think about competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, but not only do I play a ton of other games sort of casually and I know my place in those games, I also at one point, actually the majority of my time in Yu-Gi-Oh was spent as a casual player, and I liked a lot of these cards. So I think it's important to remember that I haven't always been competitive, and that a lot of times I was just playing the cards that I liked their effects or I thought looked cool, all sorts of stuff that I see in my own comment section. Anyway though, let me know what you guys think about this video, and also if you want to hear more about sort of my experience in casual Yu-Gi-Oh. But I've probably rambled on for too long. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys later. Bye.